Hello, welcome to Happy Horror Time. My name is Tim Murdoch.
And my name is Matt Emmert, and today is Friday the 13th. Not sure why I said that with a weird accent. Tim, it's your favorite day.
It is my favorite day. It's my second birthday.
It really is. And 2024, actually, do most years have more than one Friday the 13th?
Not usually. I mean, once in a blue moon, there'll be like one in April, one in May, but it's rare.
But I love it when it's in October. That's like the best ever.
Right. I mean, it's weird that it's in December, but what are you going to do?
What are you going to do? It's a holiday special of Friday the 13th. So we had a Friday the 13th in September, and we did a special episode where we had Mark Waters, the director of Mean Girls, on to talk about Friday the 13th Part 2. And we were like, you know what? It's another Friday the 13th. Why don't we do another special episode? You know why? Because we are special people, Tim.
That's right. And oh my gosh, I'm so excited to dive into this cinema.
So we thought, you know who we should have on an episode who doesn't get to talk a lot with us, but is an integral part of the Happy Horror Time team. He is the third member of our podcast, the one you don't hear every week, but is just as involved. We wanted to invite on today to discuss this movie with us. So I present to everyone, Jacob Randall.
I totally asked you not to give me a big build-up, and you just gave me a big build-up, but thank you.
But did you introduce him as your boyfriend? Because I know that my memory is so short.
I don't want to be introduced as the boyfriend. I don't, because,
I mean, did you say that, though?
Oh, no. I didn't say exactly what, but I thought, I'd still have to introduce you. I do that for all of our patrons, Jacob. And, I mean, so I wanted to do that for you, too.
I'm not a patron.
But, I mean, I do that for our patrons, our guests, our everything. So I can't turn it off. That's how I do intros.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. Hello, all the Happy Horror Time listeners out there who are aware of me but never hear me. Hi. I think the last time I was on here was like the first year we were doing this. I think it was the Night Stalker documentary episode. Or no. It was probably like the Ask Me Anything or something, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember that, Tim?
I do. We were cooped. I mean, I want to say cooped up. But you had a beautiful apartment where you and Jacob lived during, and I went there all the time.
Yeah, so for listeners who don't know Jacob, he is our producer. He helps out with a ton of stuff with us, all of our ideas and things, and like all of the behind the scenes stuff that you don't see being done.
He writes the newsletter.
Yes, he writes our newsletter, which goes out to patrons. I feel like maybe I should just say for people, if you like us talking about some of these films from the past, like what we're going to talk about today, please sign up to be a patron because you can help support us and you can hear us talk about all sorts of films from the past. And we even let patrons join us for episodes. So you can join us for an episode, blah, blah, blah. That's patreon.com/Happy Horror Time. Okay,
yeah.
Plug over. Anyway, Jacob, so Jacob's our producer. So we are very much a 3-person operation. Jacob, you just don't hear every week.
And by operation, we operate on people.
That's on their feelings
and
their emotions. Well, we haven't even introduced the movie for today. Tim, introduce it.
Let our guest do it.
Yes, Jacob, introduce it.
Okay. I think, yes, we are talking about Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D.
Well, it's so funny. Every time I mention this movie, I just say Part 3. Tim always says in 3D, but not everyone sees it in 3D, Tim.
I know, but obviously it plays in 2D, and I actually like it. I like it in 2D or 3D, and I've been very, very lucky to see it in 3D. But if you watch the film, especially in the first 20 minutes, it pushes a lot of 3D in your face.
But question about 2D. Do you like 2D from the Facts of Life?
Always.
Okay. But for me, the movie is always 3D, like, because it was filmed that way. So in my mind, it's always a 3D movie.
So I want to get, all of our listeners who've listened to at least a number of episodes know how much Tim loves Friday the 13th. They know that I love it, but Halloween is my favorite. Jacob, tell us a little bit of your history with Friday the 13th. Like, which one was the first one you saw? What do you think of it? All that shit.
Okay, so the first Friday the 13th that I saw had to be the first one. It's kind of weird because it took me a while to get to those movies as a budding horror fan as I was growing up. But honestly, I feel like I played the Friday the 13th video game on Nintendo much more than I was watching the movies at that time. I think by the time I was like 10 or 11, I finally started to really dive into them. I do remember, though, the thing that got me into them the most was that I was like up late one night. I was probably like 10 or 11, like I said. And Friday the 13th Part 2 came on, but it has that whole like flashback sequence in the beginning when Adrienne King, Alice, is sleeping and she's like dreaming about everything that happened in Part 1. And that was so effective at getting me interested in Part 1 that I watched the rest of Part 2, and then I didn't watch the rest of Part 2 at that time. I stopped, and then I went and watched Part 1 in full. So I kind of remember that happening as being like Part 2 kind of prompted me to go watch all of the first one. So Part 1 and then Part 2, and then I kind of went on randomly from there over the years.
Part 1 and Part 2 they almost look like the same film because they're both like filmed in New York. You can definitely feel in Part 3 in 3D that it is in California.
Did everyone hear he said Part 3 in 3D?
Well, can you
ever say
I
Part
can't. I'm stuck in time.
Part 3 in 3D.
But no, but you could tell it has a California look. The sun, it almost looks like a desert.
It was also the first one where it wasn't either camp counselors or people preparing to be camp counselors.
And they never say, well, they do in Part 2. She says Jason. I mean, like at the beginning, Jenny.
Oh yeah, they talk about Jason. Let me tell you about Jason.
The new cast, like the Higgins Haven people, they never say Jason. They don't know who he is. Yeah.
Oh, so even when Dana Kimmel's doing that big she doesn't say it.
No, she doesn't know who he is. Remember,
right? He's kind of like a mystery man for the whole cast and the story of Part 3, which makes Part 3 so interesting to me because Part 1 and 2 are so intertwined, and then number 3 has that whole like beginning sequence before the movie gets going that kind of catches you up. But after that beginning sequence where it's showing you the previous film in Part 2, it kind of just it abandons any like moving forward of the Jason story or the Mrs. Voorhees story or anything.
And Jason is huge, by the way. In Part 2, he's kind of a little guy, and like your cat.
I mean, because there's two. Yeah. Our cat's name is Little Guy.
But Jason is huge in Part 3.
They got a good one, and Part 3 introduces everyone to the hockey mask, and we've also gotten to speak with, is it 2 cast members from Part 3? We talked to
Larry Zerner and Tracy Savage.
Why do I feel like it's 3? We've been trying for Dana Kimmel.
Oh my God. Well, the whole world's trying to get Dana.
She disappeared.
And then, Tim, you've had an interaction with at least one other cast member, but we can talk about that later as we get into the movie if you want.
Now my memory's short.
Okay.
Yes. So does everyone remember in Part 3, and we'll get to this sequentially, but the motorcycle gang, the girl in the gang is named Fox. She's the one who swings and says, "This feels good."
Yes. And Matt also brought to my attention, and by the way, we are going to, I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to. We're going to crap on this movie a little bit, but it's not because we don't love it. We absolutely love this film, but there's so much to make fun of, and when I say making fun, we are having fun too.
Of course. Although
okay.
there's a part of me that may not be just joking because I'm only saying that because, and I actually didn't ask Jacob this. I wanted to. Part 3 is not one of my favorite Friday the 13th,
you're
but I
in good
enjoy
company.
it.
A lot of people don't jump on it and be like, oh, Part 3 is my favorite.
But I know it's one of your favorites, and because watching it with you, and we've talked about this, your enthusiasm kind of seeps into me. That sounded gross. And it made me like, okay, like you were talking about things that like I'm ragging on Dana Kimmel, and you're like, oh, I love when she did this. And I'm like, you know what? That was kind of cool.
No, she does if you go on the World Wide Web, you'll see that Dana Kimmel is dragged. And she really is. Like, they're like, she's the worst final girl ever. But I think she's great. Maybe not the first half of the film, but the second half, when it's just her and Jason, it's a dance. It's beautiful.
Oh, so before we forget, tell everyone about the person you're. Okay, Fox, go.
Okay, so I was at Gelson's, and I want to say it was like 2008 or 9. I do not remember the year. And Fox was in Gelson's, and she's got a very she almost looked exactly how she did in Friday 13 Part 3. And I went up to her, I was like, excuse me, like I never have the guts. If you know, I've had the opportunity to meet Leah Thompson like 3 times, and I always get scared. So I saw her and I said, "Hi, are you?" And she literally went like I'm walking up to Ariana Grande at the opening of Wicked, and she shushed me and she goes, "Shh." Like, it's our secret.
Her name, by the way, I was like, oh my God, I got to get her name so we're not just calling her Fox. Her name is Gloria Charles, and I love that she shushed you.
Shushed me.
Like, oh God, don't let everyone know.
Attention, Gelson's customers. We've got a celebrity in our midst.
She's like, oh my God, do not tell everybody. I am not ready to sign autographs today, Tim.
Yeah, she's like, enough of this part 3 jazz. I'm
love
just trying to shop.
You know, and I feel bad because like she has passed away. She passed away in 2016 at a pretty young age, so that sucks. But you know, she didn't.
But I love that she did that to me because I knew it was her.
Wait,
she confirmed.
she was a stewardess in National Lampoon's European Vacation. She didn't do a ton of stuff, so I feel like. Do you know if she ever did conventions? Because she could have really done a lot. We're looking through her IMDb, and she did some TV series. She didn't do a ton.
She was in Falcon Crest, wasn't
Anna Alicia. She was the big one for like 8 years.
But wasn't someone else, or was it just Falcon Crest? Maybe I'm thinking of something different. But yeah, that was probably who I was thinking of. Anna Alicia from Halloween 2.
Yeah.
From Halloween 2.
First off, props to Tim for even recognizing her, because like when you think of Friday the 30th Part 3, I would probably name 7 people in the movie before her.
Well, you brought to my attention the eye line thing, and watch this movie because you really, no pun intended, you had a really good eye when you said, look at her eyes, because she does not look at the girl she's talking to.
Yeah, in the scene at the convenience store when she steals Vera's wallet and she's trying to like intimidate her, and please, if you listen to this and watch Friday the 13th Part 3, trust me on this, watch Fox's eye line. She's looking to the left of Vera, and every time I watch this movie, I'm like, do they have her lines on cue cards? What is she looking at?
It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, she's not the person I would think of when I think of this movie, although we do quote the woo, this feels good. We're always saying that.
Nice.
Yeah, but she is really memorable, right? I mean, you recognized her at Gelson's in the early 2000s, so, you know, she had an impact, and she adds something to the movie. So may she rest in peace.
One last thing before we get to the plot, Jacob, Tim and I have done this. Top 3 Friday the 13th. Go. It doesn't have to be in order. It's too hard to say your number one. Top 3.
Okay, I need Tim to go first, and then Matt, you go, and then I'll go.
For you.
No, I can't. I need a minute to think about it. I wasn't ready.
Okay, I'll go. So I like 3 and 4 interchangeably, and I really like 7 and 1 and 6 and 5.
No,
I love them all.
I knew it. Good old Tim. Tim running for senator. He likes them all. I will answer. Okay. I want to say it's so hard because I have a top 4. It's 1, 2, 4, and 7. And I don't know if I can get rid of one of them because 1, 2, 4, and 7 are ones I could watch over and over and over and over again.
That's weird. No one's mentioning part 5.
We didn't say bottom 3. Anyway, Jacob?
So 1 is my top, obviously. I just can't. I can't relinquish that. But honestly, I think after that, this may be controversial, but I think my second favorite is part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. I just love the whole thing. They're on the boat. They spend a tiny bit of time in Manhattan. I just really like it because it's such like an 80s slasher, and it moves right along. It doesn't drag. It's like the pace is really good. And then I didn't even say a part 3 yet, did I? Or a third one. A third one for me, I guess would have to be... I guess part 2.
I mean, I love them all.
I know. I knew I wouldn't get. That's why when you asked Tim, that's like, Tim, give me your favorite Scream. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Speaking of Scream, I'm so glad you brought that up because so the teenagers in Friday the 13th Part 3 are so not aware. Yeah, they're not self-aware, and they don't have they're not the script is not like zippy and like, look at me saying cool cutting edge things. Like this movie has like the most bare bones dialogue.
Well, when we talked to Tracy Savage and Larry Zerner, they both said that director Steve Miner was so unconcerned with their performances as actors, he just wanted to get all the 3D shots correctly. He was all about the technical stuff.
But even parts 1 and 2, it's not. There's a little more in depth on the characters, but this one especially is just the gimmick of 3D.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate too and I do like the movie. I have a special place in my heart for it, as I do with all of them basically. But the last time we watched it recently, I was just thinking, man, it just was not worth it to make this all about the 3D. Like it's just like I would have rather have had a Friday the 13th Part 3 that was somewhat better with the dialogue and the story and the whole plot of the movie and everything. I would prefer to have that even be just average or not that great and bad 3D than like the 3D effort we got in sacrifice to the rest of the movie.
And boy, was it sacrifice, because we had fresh eyes on it.
Yeah.
And Jacob kind of like brought to my attention, like, yeah, maybe this isn't a great film after I just got done praising it. Like, because nothing really does happen until it's just Jason and Dana.
Well, yeah. And so let's go through, let's like take our viewers, where am I? Who's watching us?
I'm looking at you, but I mean,
Tim, let's take our viewers. Hi, viewers.
That's
Hey,
just
everyone.
me. It's just me.
I'm Fox at the Gelsons. Hey, guys. Shh. Don't tell anybody.
yeah. Oh my gosh.
Get the
I'll never forget
paparazzi
it.
out, Tim. Do not call them.
I wasn't going to sit her down and be like, hey, can you do a play by play? I
You know
wasn't
what?
going to do that.
She's been stopped in Gelson's before. Anyway, okay. So Friday the 13th, in true Friday the 13th style, it opens with the end of the previous movie. But what is different in part 3 than part 2 is that it's not shown in a dream sequence. And I actually like this because they just open with the end like part with Ginny running and going and putting on Mrs. Voorhees' sweater and talking to Jason pretending to be Mrs. Voorhees, and we get that whole ending. And I actually prefer that because the way they did the Adrian King flashbacks, it felt tedious how much she kept tossing and turning and remembering those things. What did you guys think?
Well, yeah, I liked it better because it was to the point. It was just, and I think I noticed some cuts in there when they were showing us the previous movie. Like, I think I noticed some additional cuts, but it did feel a lot quicker and like we got to the main movie a lot sooner. I think that what we got to necessarily wasn't like worth a big buildup anyway, but still,
Well, I always forget. Jacob, have you seen this in 3D? Have you gone to a revival screening?
I don't think I have. I don't know. I kind of feel like I have, but I'm just not sure. I know I've seen it in theaters with you guys.
Oh, yeah. You saw just a 2D at the Los Feliz.
Yeah, Tim and I have seen this more times than I care to admit on the big screen, but the one time we did see it in 3D, I don't think Jacob was with us, but that's when Larry Zerner appeared.
Yeah, he was there. It was a packed soda audience on Hollywood Boulevard.
And I will say I wanted to see it in 3D just to see what the 3D was all about, and guess what? I wasn't that impressed.
Oh, really?
With the 3D?
I mean, but I'm so easily impressed.
Only because, like Jacob said, I agree that it felt gimmicky on a movie that didn't need that gimmick.
Do you remember in the first 5 minutes of the film when it's Amy Steele and Betsy Palmer and all that, you wear this sunglasses. You wear this 3D glasses, right? Was it blurry?
I don't know, because I think the 3D cut is made
when
so that even
when the
normal
awesome
stuff.
credits come in is when it really kicks in.
Yeah, and speaking of the awesome credits, so after we get to part 2, and by the way, do you notice they cut the entire muffin sequence from the end of part 2 with the window, because they just show him like it's almost like, okay, was he dead? But they show him at the end, and then they go right to the credits, and this was the first movie or the only movie where they introduced the disco theme, right? Is that what they call it?
Because 1982, we still had disco around. I mean, like, it was not dead yet. So,
and I know, Jacob, you like that theme, right? I love this theme.
Oh, I love it. And we play it at our Halloween party every year. And yeah, I think that it's so snappy. Like, it's just a whole different vibe than the previous 2 movies.
Oh, Tim, favorite Friday the 13th soundtrack? Score?
I think
from which
Harry
one?
Manfredini really... Jacob and I were saying last night that the score really makes this film. Could you imagine part 3 without the score?
Oh, no, I mean, I couldn't imagine any of the Friday the 13th.
I know, but I mean, but this one really takes it to another level.
Is there a specific Friday the 13th that has music that is your favorite, or is it this one?
I like part 6, the opening. It's a really good one. And part 7 just takes all of them and kind of refurbishes them. I don't know if that's
I was going to say part 6 and part 8 have like the best soundtrack in terms of the 80s songs and everything. I mean, there's so much good music on.
Oh, and the original
part 6.
is really eerie.
Well, yeah, but those are the scores, I guess. They like, it's one thing with the musical score that's been sort of, composed for the backing of the movie, but then in parts, oh my gosh, in parts, what was I just saying? Part 6 and 8. Yeah. Part 6 and 8, they really have like actual rock songs that they're playing on the soundtrack. And you get Alice Cooper has like 2 or 3 songs on 6. And then there's some great music on 8. So I just liked, I guess that's why I like those, because of the, they're actual rock songs.
I totally misspoke. I meant score. From a soundtrack standpoint, definitely agree. 6 and 8 are the best. From a score standpoint, is there one that stands out for you,
Part
Tim?
4 is like definitely like takes it to a more dark place.
Yeah, the thing about part 3 I love because it's fun, but if you want scary 1 and 4, I think, or like eerie, I can't believe we're really going deep into these Friday the 13th
but
scores.
Imagine these films without the score. So the score is so integral. Did I say that right? Integral.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So we
50
get
cent words.
the fun 3D credits. We get the fun disco theme. It's new. Then we get the second opening scene, because the first was the flashback of part 2, and we get the second opening scene, which takes place at Crystal Lake Variety Store, and we basically are introduced to Harold and Edna. And tell us about Edna, the actress. Tim.
Edna is so much younger than her husband, but they tried to age her and they put her in curlers and made her with knitting needles, and she treats Harold terrible, and rightfully so. Harold is disgusting. He walks around with a rabbit and he eats food from their grocery store out in the middle of nowhere.
They're running a store near Crystal Lake. I get why they needed this scene. It was almost like the transition. It's like, ooh, he's still alive and he's near Crystal Lake. So I get why and I will say this. I found the maskless Jason walking through the laundry lines creepy. Like, it was a very Michael Myers Halloweenish type thing when he's just standing there watching them. Like, that was creepy. But then they put in Harold carrying a rabbit, and it's like, what? It's
I don't know what kind of, Harold's not funny, he's not likable. And as a kid, truth be told, I did not watch this whole sequence. I fast forwarded right to when Chris pulls up to that house.
It's just sort of the characters are not very interesting. So I get the point of why they chose to have a scene to show us that, hey, Jason is still around, he's at Crystal Lake, and he's still killing people and everything. But these characters are completely forgettable, and they're not connected to anything. Like in part 1, Annie, hey, hi, name's Annie. She's at least sort of connected to the greater plot in the sense that she's one of the counselors and she's the first one that gets killed present day, and then her body shows up later. But these two people just forget about them, have no connection to anything going on.
It's to add to the body count, which I like it. In a nostalgic, because it's like, hey, we get these 2 deaths, and they really push. He opens the cage. Is it? Yeah. And a snake comes out, and you can totally see the string.
Yeah, but also the worst part about this scene is that they have the character of Harold take a dump, and they play plopping noises, and it's
I didn't hear it until we saw it on the big screen. You can actually hear the plop.
And I guess I'm one. And look, but you know me, I'm crude, I'm obscene, I have no problem with toilet humor, but. Why, was Steve Miner hey, let's add this scene and this is going to really do it for the audience?
Maybe it's setting the tone hey, what you're about to witness for the next hour and a half is silly.
But it ends up making you just want the character to die, because it's he's not sanitary, he's gross. So for me, that just turned me against the character, because I'm like, ooh, this is a gross, unsanitary character. He should die.
Edna's a kind of a bitch.
He doesn't wipe and he does not wash his hands. So right away you're grossed out. But he gets killed very quickly after that. He gets an axe in his chest.
Oh, and you can totally see the big thing where the axe goes.
The padding.
Yes,
yeah. And then
okay.
I will say Edna's death was because she was just annoying. She's yelling at Harold. She's yelling, and she gets a knitting needle through the back of her head. But then it kind of just does remember that, what's it called? The wipe effect. It's almost okay, let's wipe this away and then let's get onto our main cast. It's kind of like that,
Yeah. And thank God it moved on, because I'm not saying this batch of characters is more, well, yeah, they are more interesting.
Oh my God, are you kidding? 100 times. So I'm going to give you a little intro to our main batch of characters. So we're introduced to Chris, who's Dana Kimmel. She's I'm not spoiling anything. She's our final girl. She's very at that time in the 80s, she was your typical final girl. She's prudish. She's smart. She's not going to just sleep with some guy. She's very responsible. She's the one not doing drugs, typical final girl of the 80s. Then we get Debbie and Andy, who are a couple, and Debbie randomly tells us that she's pregnant. Now, it is such a random fact. Even Tracy Savage, who played Debbie when we talked to her, had no idea why they decided to make her pregnant.
Well, she did say that to make it darker or more sad when she does get killed.
Do you remember a pregnant girl teenager in a horror movie, Jacob? Of any horror? I can't, because I can't.
I can't think of any from this era off the top of my head.
Only the Dream Child.
Oh well, yeah. That came a little bit later, but yeah. Lisa Wilcox playing Alice was pregnant in Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, but that was like 1989. But I can't think of anyone before that. I'm sure there could be someone. I mean, Rosemary's Baby, I guess.
But those movies, I'll say, were about the character being pregnant. It wasn't just a detail they threw in, like, oh, I have red hair. That's how she threw it in. I'm pregnant.
Yeah, and like the fact that they might have done it to make it like more consequential or darker, as you said, when she gets killed later. I mean, cool idea, but it didn't work because I totally forget that she's pregnant. They don't reference
it's a
enough
throwaway line
for me to hear
Yeah.
or for me to really think about it. So I didn't even think about that.
She's got to be in her first trimester because she has the best beach body. So obviously she's
Well,
not
and
showing.
wasn't she just, I think she was 17, maybe 18 when she filmed this movie. She was
yeah.
the youngest one.
It is just such a weird detail. Anyway, moving on with the characters, we also are introduced to Vera, who they pick up, and also who they're trying to set up with their friend Shelley. Now, Shelley, Larry Zerner, is the jokester. He's very much kind of a woe is me type of character because, you know, he's a little chubby. He's got like a big fro of hair, but he's very down on himself more so than anybody
And
else is.
Well, one thing I also picked up watching this movie was like no one has any luggage. He has like a tiny little thing, and they actually comment on that. She goes, you have all that in that little thing?
Yeah, and but he likes to play jokes, and I'm not going to take a big psychological look into this, but I get the feeling because he's insecure, he tries to make people laugh so that they laugh with him, not at him.
Any attention is good attention for someone who can't get attention.
I have to say too, like Larry Zerner gets a gold star for this movie for me because he really does. Somehow he's managed to play one of the, in my opinion, one of the more memorable characters of the whole franchise. Like, and he has sort of the most interesting, one of the more interesting stories of within this cast.
Yeah, he has an
plot.
arc.
Like he has a little bit of an arc, and there's something to invest in, and there's something kind of charming about him and his take on the role. So it's weird because like of all the things this movie does wrong, I think Larry Zerner is one of the bright spots.
And I love that Larry totally embraces it, and he's the one that introduces the hockey mask.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that sentiment because in a cast of forgettable characters, he is someone who sticks out because you do remember him. Not only does he look different than the other characters, he acts different. He's the only one that plays jokes. He's the only one that has like, you feel for him because you know he's down on himself, and you know that the girl they're setting him up with, Vera, is not interested in him, but like you know that he makes these jokes because it comes from a place where he's just not comfortable with himself. The other two characters that are in this group of people are, you want to talk about one-dimensional characters, Chuck and Chili. And by the way, Chuck looks like a Cheech and Chong guy, but all they're known for...
Cheech and Chong was at its height then?
Yes, and they're just known for being big stoners. They literally do nothing else but smoke pot.
I swear the director told them, like, have a joint in every scene. You have to, like, always be smoking pot because there is, like, isn't there a scene where they're walking around the barn later and they're, like, carrying a joint?
Yeah.
Or, like, walking around. Anyway, just... Yeah.
As someone who's never smoked before, I don't know. Like, I'd be scared to... Well, I'm so scared about everything in the world. But, like, to smoke in a barn, the barn could light up.
I mean, that's but then I guess you can't have a I mean, I guess you could say like, well, then never have a fireplace because the home could have a fire.
Never.
Good old Tim. Don't put a job like that's the reason you're not smoking. So anyway, they all take off and they're going to spend the weekend at Chris's family's cabin. Is it
Higgins Haven?
Higgins Haven because it's Chris Higgins. And now up until this point, Chris keeps mentioning something that like she needs to get over what happened to her. Like you get the story later, but it's like the big like, oh, you know, ever since what happened to her, this is her time to get through it, get over it. But
this backstory, by the way, it's welcome because it's like the other girl, like Adrienne King, she had a little backstory in part 2. Obviously, she was killed off very quickly. And then Jenny Field just was kind of like, she knew something was up. I mean, the whole movie's a big
and
point
she
of view.
had the child psychology major, so she was more in tune with like how people think, especially kids, that kind of thing. Dana Kimmel, though, that's really her big thing. Her family owns this place. She has a little bit something she got over, which we'll get to. But anyway, as they're driving to the cabin, I love that because they killed off Crazy Ralph in part 2, it's almost like Steve Miner was like, well, we like, who's going to fill that role? So, Tim, tell us about the Crazy Ralph substitute.
They almost like he's literally sleeping in the middle of the road and he goes, oh, I must be in heaven. That's the way he talks. And then like, so they all get out and surround him. And he is like, he goes, I have warned thee. And he he brings out an eyeball, and then you hear Larry Zerner goes, "That's an eyeball," and
then they all
leave.
run away. Thoughts on him versus Crazy Ralph, Jacob?
Well, first of all, for so long in my life, I thought that the guy who played this Crazy Ralph type character in part 3, I thought that was Donald Pleasance from Halloween.
I could see it.
He kind of looks like him, and for years I just thought, oh wow, he did Halloween 1 and 2, and now he's in this. But I mean, Crazy Ralph, the actor who played him, whose name escapes me, but Tim probably knows.
Gormy something.
Walt Gorney.
Yeah, I thought played Crazy Ralph so well. It was sort of understated. He could have taken it into this sort of like fantastical, over the top place. He didn't. But this guy in part 3, it was just too much.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I can't.
No. I first off, I got to comment on the Donald Pleasance thing. Like me and my like loving Halloween and knowing everything like Donald Pleasance did and everything is like insulted that you would think he would do a Friday the 13th
If he
movie.
did a Halloween film, which no one's heard of.
Oh yeah, right. After doing 5 Halloween films, he would never jump series. No. With that said, that substitute was bad. Here's why they did it: because he was able to push that eyeball into your face and make it a 3D's part.
And that's actually a thing about part 2 that I don't like, is that they killed Crazy Ralph.
Quickly.
This was like their chance to have something of a Dr. Loomis or something. At least they would have, if they had kept Crazy Ralph around, they could have had him in like every movie.
Yes.
And it would have been
like a staple.
Yeah, it would have been really cool, and they just blew it.
Also insulted that you compared Crazy Ralph to Dr. Loomis, because Dr. Loomis is a smart, resourceful...
They're both good actors, Matt.
No, I love Crazy
But
Ralph. He's no Dr. Loomis, but I do love Crazy Ralph.
When they all get back into the van, you can also see on Chris's van, it says Chris with like a flower on the door.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, there's also a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers sticker on the back of the van, which I love because I'm a Tom Petty fan, but I always notice that sticker. I think that's so like of the time.
1982.
So they get to the cabin, and we're introduced to one more character who's been waiting there for Chris. It's Rick, who I guess they don't explain it specifically, but it's Chris's, is it like on again, off again boyfriend?
Well, she's not. I don't think she wants to. I mean, like, I think he's just down to clown, and she's like looking for a relationship, and he's not there yet.
They've had some sort of history, but the thing with Rick, and the one thing that annoys me a little bit about Rick, is that it's the same thing that annoys me about Mekhi Phifer and I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. All he talks about is sex. All he wants to do is get her in bed. And I'm just like, I get it. You're trying to play the horny teenager, but it's like, it becomes a little much.
It's kind of a one-note character, but he does take the time in the middle of the film to listen to her do a great monologue.
Probably to get her in bed. But so Rick is played by Paul Kratka, right?
Yes.
God, how do I know all these names?
He's
Who
on
am
my
I?
shirt.
Tim Murdoch? Tim is wearing a part 3 in 3D shirt right now, which is awesome because we don't have those shirts, Jacob.
Oh, yeah. And were you referencing the Chris's monologue, her talking about what happened to her?
Dana Kimmel has a monologue right in the middle of the film. If you ever go onto the World Wide Web, this is where she's dragged because everyone hates it, and I like it.
I actually like it too. I like it too.
Hold on that, because we have a few things to get to. That's a big part, but we'll get to that. I just want to.
Are you saying that this is a complex?
It's a
movie?
complex script. I have to go through everything. No, but I did want to go through because there is one big part that happens before that, and it's Shelley playing the joke on all of them, where he pretends he's killed, and he puts, what is it, like an axe in his head?
He's got a big kind of curly hair, like Annie hair, so he puts like an axe into his head. And then there's this, he screams, and like there's this part where Dana and Paul Kratka, what's his name in the movie? Rick. How could I not know that?
Rick and Chris.
Rick and Chris. Did you know his name was originally going to be Derek, but since they have to scream it so much, they said, let's change it to Rick.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's fun fact. I think it's in Peter Brackey's book, Crystal Lake Memories.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, because I mean, like, Derek.
Oh, God.
Just yelled
Rick.
Rick.
And then they just took the second syllable.
Right.
Makes sense.
So when they have this scene where she goes, every year, my dad always gets all this hay and no horse. You figure it out. And so...
Is that around the scene?
No, he's shirtless. That's what I'm trying to get to. He's shirtless, so that's kind of awesome.
Oh, that was a weird tangent from You were telling us about Shelley pulling the practical
he's pulling
joke.
her up on this rope, like, because that's how you pull up the hay. And
I'm
it's
sorry, I'm
just
just laughing.
scene.
We're like, okay, so Shelley's pretending to be dead.
Yes,
You're like,
but, like, he
Paul
screams,
Crack naked.
and so Rick and Chris run upstairs, and Chris goes into the room first by herself.
And she believes it when finally it's Andy, Debbie's boyfriend, who comes in and tickles him and knows that he's playing a prank, and they're all pissed. And they're like, what do they say, Timmy?
This dialogue is really like muddled, but the guy that plays Andy, he goes, Shelley goes, I didn't mean to. And then for some reason, Andy, this is such a weird line, but I always hold on to it. He goes, you never mean to, He goes,
You never mean to.
You never mean to,
By the way, Andy's favorite thing to do is walk on his hands.
Yes,
that and yo-yo.
That's his character trait.
Yeah, that's his character trait. So we do have one other thing because Larry goes off with Vera to the convenience store, and that's when we're introduced to the motorcycle. I just said
Zerner.
Larry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Whoa.
Larry, your dad?
See, you're saying Dana. I'm thinking character name. Sorry.
I know.
Shelley. Shelley and Vera go off, and Vera, is sort of warming up to Shelley, but they go to the convenience store. They run into this motorcycle gang, 3 people, including Fox, Tim's friend.
Right. Gelson Star.
And that is when they take Vera's wallet, and that is when Fox is looking to the side away from her when she's delivering
and then
the
she
lines.
opens the wallet and she goes, this is your rubber?
I know. It's a weird scene, but they do have, and I wanted your thoughts on this, Jacob, because this is where I think you were saying that Shelley had sort of an arc, because he decides, rather than backing down, he's going to stand up to this motorcycle gang by driving over their motorcycle. Now, decision or
well, the first one was an accident. He backed up into it.
Well, he's not making smart decisions, but he is being, I don't want to say courageous, but he's not being a little fraidy cat. Like, he's trying to show that he has a spine, and he's, but at this point in the movie, like I was saying when we were watching it the other night, all of this stuff is just dragging for me. All of this stuff is not moving the movie forward. But anyway.
But you know what? The motorcycle gang cracks the window, and it's not their car. It's Rick's car.
It's Rick's car, which they take. And when they get back, you see Shelley give him money. And then Rick is like, you know what? I am tired of these, what's the word I'm looking for? Like
amateurs?
I was going to say amateurs, which makes no sense. But they're acting like little kids.
Yeah. Well, I can't imagine if I were Rick and I lent my car just to go down the street to the convenience store, and they came back with a cracked window, like the weekend's over.
Yeah, and then he's wearing like a preppy sweater, side note, and then she's like, stay with me, and he goes, you don't play fair, do you?
Because he may get her in bed again.
Right. He's like, you don't play fair.
So the motorcycle gang, this is why they only introduced this motorcycle gang to have body count, because they come back because they're pissed at what Shelley did, and they're going to siphon the gas out of the van that is parked at Higgins Haven. But then they also, and this is what we were talking about yesterday, it looks like they're going to light the barn on fire.
Said, go take is it oil? What is it?
Gasoline. It's oil. But try running your car with oil, Tim.
You know what? I get confused. Diesel. But they pour it all over the barn. I mean, the job is to pour it all over the barn.
By the way, can you please tell the story of when you filled your mom's car with diesel fuel instead of unleaded?
Christmas 5 years ago, I filled it with diesel. My mom, for $1,000, had to get it removed from the car. Merry Christmas.
And like I was saying earlier, all of this just drags for me. The whole barn scene. First of all, the beginning scene that we talked about with, at the convenience store, but then we spend a little bit of the time with the new characters, but then we go to this, to the barn and everything. And I'm just like peeling my face off waiting for it to end. And I remember looking at the clock, and it was like 20, 25 minutes into the movie, this is all still happening. We haven't even gotten to Jason stalking the people at the cabin and killing them yet. And so I was just dying.
But he does kill each of these people, starting with Fox after she swings and says, "This feels good," which is my favorite line in the movie.
And her death is not seen. You get to see the after effect, because then the other guy comes in. What's his name? Chili?
No, that's one of the guys. I don't know. Let's say motorcycle gang member
number 2. He comes in and...
Oh, well, so he finds Fox with a pitchfork in her neck.
Right, and he's smoking a cig.
And then he gets a pitchfork in his stomach. And then the last motorcycle gang guy comes and finds the guy. And he actually faces off with Jason for a little bit, but then Jason grabs, what is it that he beats him with?
It's like a horse tool.
He hits him again and again and again.
I did not like that.
And again.
I mean, I understand Jason's. I'm like, why am I like he's a killer? But
yeah.
like, it's like in his face. It's very excessive. I mean,
it is. But you know what? Like at that point, it's not like any of us like the motorcycle gang. So I can't like, did anybody care that they got killed?
No, I didn't care. And also, like, it makes me think because if you're presenting like a motorcycle gang, I think the idea is that these are supposed to be tough, like rough and tough people. My first question is, did people in the early 80s when they first saw this, did they think like, oh, these are tough characters, these are kind of scary characters, or did they think they're just like laughable, kind of how I do? Because like when I see movies now, like if you see a modern movie and they show you like a gang, like most of the time they're pretty threatening and pretty believable, and this was so laughable to me that I never thought that they were like, I did not care that they died, but I also thought it was just really silly.
Growing up in the suburbs, I'm sure I was scared of them, and these kids in the woods probably would have been scared of them as well.
At the convenience store, I remember when I saw this movie for the first time, thinking at the convenience store they were intimidating, because I'm like, oh my god, if people like grab my wallet and are threatening me, like I don't know what I'm going to do.
Not only that, the two guys grab Shelley on either side.
Yeah, exactly.
That's intense.
In the barn, they are like lame ducks. Like obviously they don't, other than the third guy like facing off with Jason, the other two are just completely lame ducks. And I will say one thing I think is funny about their outfits is like, it reminds me of if I was like going to a costume party and they said dress as a motorcycle gang.
Right,
Remember, like it's so obvious, like all of them had leather jackets and it's like, hey, let's think motorcycle gang.
Like her heels and pants could not have been tighter or more uncomfortable in a hot barn.
Yeah, I mean, how they're dressing for the time to me strikes me as like very counterculture, like very like, you know, Billy Idol, Sex Pistols, gang stuff, you know, bullies, like leather jackets, the headbands, all that kind of bandanas. But then like today, like that's how so many people dress all the time that it's just no longer that aren't actually tough. Like it's so funny to think about that now. But also like, I guess the movie could have been trying to show us like Jason's so tough and threatening that he's going to take out this biker gang
in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, but it did not land that way for me.
Well, also like they did try. They attempted at some kind of suspense,
wonderful,
some kind of wonderful starring Leah Thompson. No, they have this scene where Fox is walking through the barn and like she grabs the canteen and she slaps it. And then she trips, and then there's like a big, like, what is that thing called with hay? A pitchfork?
Well, yeah, the pitchfork.
So
what killed her?
What killed her?
Oh, yeah.
But like she falls and it's like,
called?
but like it goes right up to her face. Like
it's like because they're
ooh.
milking 3D and that
Yeah.
point. Anyway, so we get to the big scene that you guys wanted to talk about, which was Chris's big story to Rick about what happened to her. And first they have to go off. Where did they go? Like 5 minutes down the road.
It looks like you can't even. It's not even like a beautiful like waterfall. It's like it looks like a sewer pipe.
So Chris tells Rick what happened to her, and do one of you want to paraphrase the story? Tim? Yeah.
Both of us.
Oh, okay. Yeah, tell everyone. So what happened to Chris?
Well, Chris, she does. It was a night she'll never forget where her mother slapped her. Her mother had never slapped her before.
Yeah. Okay, I don't need you to recite
and
it.
She snuck out, and she was out in the woods under an old oak tree.
Oh wow!
She was sitting by Camp Crystal Swamp. Like,
yeah, it's disgusting.
Yes, Jacob said that because if you look at the lake in this movie, okay, in part 1 and part 2, it is truly a lake. It's a huge body of water. In part 3, it looks like a tiny pond or swamp.
It was man-made, clearly, just for the film.
What if it was woman-made, Tim?
Well, man and woman made the pond.
Good. Okay, so keep going. So she's sitting under a tree.
She's sitting under a tree, and it's really kind of cool. It's like they have her face, and it's like behind her face is her sitting there in this big sweater, and like Jason's coming up, but he's not wearing his mask.
She was approached by Jay, as I get right down to it, like a creepy guy who she didn't know who it was. It's Jason, a deformed guy, attacked her. But as she's telling this story, it almost looks like they're leading to saying that he raped her, but they don't quite get to that. And they leave it right before she says what happened. She says she blacked out and woke up in her bed. So we never find out.
And her parents have never talked about it.
And we never find out what Jason truly did. He attacked her, but one thing she will never forget is that horrible face. Because
I'll
I'll
never forget that
horrible face. Never. What's that? Okay, so I do have to say, and I'm sorry, I'm going to rag on Dana Kimmel for this. The one thing that I laugh at every time is the way she delivers the line, "I'll never forget that horrible face, never." And then she hears a sound and turns and says, "What's that?"
No, she says, like, "What's that?"
Like, it is just really hilarious. Jacob, what are your thoughts on this backstory?
I like the backstory. I like that it gives her a connection to Jason, even though he's unnamed and they don't really expand on it. That's the thing where I think they misfired, is that they did make her character more interesting by giving her this sort of past event with Jason, but they don't go far enough with it to make it as profound as it could be. I do like her delivering the monologue. I think that Dana Kimmel did a great job with that. I think the line that you're talking about is funny. I think that we kind of joke about it a little bit and exaggerate it, but I kind of chalk it up to the dialogue. That's such a, that line, like, "I'll never forget that horrible face." Never. Well, it's sort of like, it's not, I don't know. I don't know if I want to say it's the dialogue completely, but to a degree.
And by the way, Rick couldn't be more unsupportive. Like, I just don't get the feeling he truly cares. Yeah, I really feel like he's kind of putting on like, "Oh, it's okay, it's fine. Now let's get back and have sex."
I think the way the movie succeeds is that she did get away. She did kick the knife out of his hand. So Jason probably does have that personal thing, like, "I'm gonna get ya."
Okay, question: which backstory / relation to Jason do you prefer? This one with Chris, or Rennie being pulled down in the lake as a kid by Jason when she was learning to swim?
Oh gosh. I'm always going to be earlier 80s than late 80s. So of course Dana.
Wait, what was the question?
I said, which relation, you said you liked that she had a connection to Jason in the past. Which connection do you like better? Chris's connection being attacked earlier, or Rennie in part 8 having been pulled down into the lake by Jason? Remember when she's learning to swim?
Oh, yeah. No, I like Rennie's more because it comes a little bit more full circle to me, even though Dana Kimmel's character, Chris, does get attacked by Jason in the end of the movie, and that whole, it kind of comes full circle there. But in part 8, it just seemed more central to her character, to Rennie. She struggles with the water. She has all these memories from the past, and
you didn't get me in the lake, and you're not gonna get me now.
Yeah, and it connects to like her Uncle Charles, and and then they're on a boat for a lot of the movie.
Pushes her in.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of like different strings and connections that make it better.
Yeah, I prefer the Rennie connection because I just feel like they explored it more. Like with Chris,
what? You two being boyfriends, I feel very ganged up on right now.
I know. Tim is always going to defend Dana Kimmel, which is good. I think you should, Anyway, so then we get a bunch of scenes of a lot of characters walking around, looking, hearing sounds and stuff. But I want to get to Shelley and Vera, because that is, I will say, that's my favorite scene in the movie.
What are you doing?
Vera's death, because first Shelley plays a prank on Vera and this is quite a prank. He literally goes under the water in a wetsuit with a hockey mask on and jumps out at her on the dock. And she's, of course, pissed. What I think is funny about this is that how did Shelley not learn from the last prank that no one wants him to do anymore?
Oh, I know.
Pranks?
Like that first one, everyone was like, "You're awful," and so he's like,
"Do another one."
He goes, "You know what? Let me step up and be more awful."
Well, but you know how earlier in the movie when they're in the back of the van and he's got like, what is it, like a suitcase or a box or something,
yeah.
and I think Vera's like, what's in there or whatever,
wetsuit,
and he's like, "My whole world." You'll see. I feel like that. This is his whole world: jokes, pranks, and tricking people. Like that's his entire identity.
I will say I do know, like, it is a character trait where people that just don't know how to relate to you on a serious level, they can only make jokes. Like, I feel like Shelley's one of those people. He does not know probably how to talk to a girl and just be like, "Where are you from?"
Anyone.
Well, yeah, like, imagine like what you talked on a first date, like, "Where are you from?" Like, what are you interested? He has to play jokes on them.
And Larry Zerner knew how to do this character, because it seems like it's funny to think like, oh, brilliant performance, but he really is really good as this character, and it's easily one of those things that you could just sort of write off as not a difficult thing to do, but he is embodying that character.
Well, the dialogue gets really super sad. She goes, He goes, I don't want you to think I'm nothing. She goes, I never said you were nothing. And he goes, you didn't have to.
I agree. And I'm not just saying this because we've had the two of them on the podcast, but I think Larry Zerner's performance as Shelley and even Tracy Savage's performance as Debbie, something about the way she delivers lines very naturally. And I think the reason I notice it so much in this movie is because it clashes with Dana Kimmel, who I feel sounds a little more forced. Like the way Debbie...
Dana Kimmel comes from sitcom acting. She had a, what's that called? A contract to do like a certain amount of sitcoms. So her acting is very sitcoming, and I do recognize that.
No, I guess I can see that, but it's like Tracy Savage, like the way she says a line is like how I would just talk to you randomly. It's just like, hey, what are you doing? Like she seems very natural. And Larry Zerner, like you said, he played, even though in the interview we had with him, he did tell us that like he was playing sort of a version of himself. Like he could understand how to play that character. He still did it well. Like just because you're playing some sort of version of yourself doesn't mean you're going to play it well. And he did play it well.
Do these stupid things because I have to. No, you don't have to.
So Vera, then she drops his wallet in the pond/swamp.
And the way she did it is awesome.
And as she's picking it up, she thinks that Shelley is coming back to do another prank, but it's really Jason who's now acquired Shelley's hockey mask. He's huge, but this is the first scene of Jason wearing the hockey mask, correct?
Yes, walking down with I don't even know what that thing is.
What is that called?
It's like a harpoon gun or a spear gun or something.
And this is my favorite death scene. Tim, do her line.
Who are you? Now cut that out. That's not funny.
That's exactly how she says it too. And he shoots her and the harpoon goes through her eye. She falls into the water.
And this is like another moment where I give the movie props because this was a good death scene. Like this is a cool death sequence. It looked good. The practical effects looked good. It was a cool introduction to Jason as we really know him, like this bigger form and with the hockey mask. So they do get like...
And it is kind of, I mean, like, I'm trying to remember when I first saw this when I was 9 or 10, when he did walk out with that hockey mask on, there is something like, this person is not going to be nice. This girl doesn't have a chance.
Everything about this scene I love. I love the way the kill. I love Jason in it. I love how Vera gets it. And I also think if you're going to make a moment 3D, this is the one that works because everyone watching this in 3D kind of like jumps back because it looks like the thing is coming at you. Like there's so many moments in this movie they put 3D in which are so dumb, but this one works.
It does work. And here's a fun fact. The girl that played Vera, she's in Weekend at Bernie's. And the whole point of Weekend at Bernie's is that like Bernie is dead and she's apparently is his girlfriend. So she goes upstairs and Bernie's dead. And then she comes downstairs and like Andrew McCarthy and Jonathan Silverman they're like, hey, what did you do? And she goes like, she's implying that she had sex with Bernie. So in the movie, Vera.
So she's a necrophiliac.
Yes.
Oh, got it.
But it's comedy.
So the next death is, we get a scene, a very reserved kind of sex scene between Andy and Debbie where really
in a hammock.
They're in a hammock and you only really see their feet. But then, of course, every Friday the 13th movie, Debbie takes a shower because every girl has to shower. Actually, that's not true because in part 4, Peter Barton so someone has to shower. Someone has to shower in a Friday the 13th movie. And while she is showering, Andy is walking on his hands because that's all he does. And he gets a machete down I guess right into the groin, like before Terrifier ever did it.
Right. I mean, and they don't show anything like watching Terrifier and then watching Friday the 13th Part 3. It's so tame.
It is a great death scene if we saw a little bit more of it, not because I'm a gore hound, but just because you see...
Well, you do kind of see it when she sees him in the rafters.
But when he gets the machete through the half of him, like between his legs, you literally don't see anything. He just falls over.
Yeah, it's such a quick cut that it does leave something to be desired, but I think they make up for a little bit when they have his bloody body, but yeah, compared to Terrifier, it's totally
not even
different.
close. Well, they do a kind of a special effect where it looks like a glass is put up, so you see like splatters of like blood, like where Jason like comes down with that machete.
But I do like how they kill her, right?
Yes, her death scene, I was just going to say, is my second favorite scene because she gets a Fangoria magazine, sits in a hammock, and then in an homage to Kevin Bacon's death scene from part 1, she gets a machete from the back underneath the hammock through her chest, and it's pretty brutal.
No, it is. And she told us that it took 9 hours and she said they had one shot. And it is fantastic fantastic.
But the best part is, and this has to be terrifying if you're that character, right before she gets the machete in her, she looks up and sees her dead boyfriend.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when you see him kind of cut in half with his guts out. And that's the last image she sees.
And the way the blood like hits the magazine, I sound like so weird to be so excited, but it's magical.
Yeah, that's kind of a cool moment for horror fans and Fangoria, like just to see the blood dripping down on the Fangoria magazine. I just think that's a little bit neat.
I agree.
I mean, again, this scene and Vera's death, great. If the whole movie were those two scenes, love it. You know,
but actually, my favorite scenes in the movie is just when everyone's dead except for Chris and Jason.
Well, now we've basically. Oh, so then we get to. I forget. It's not even. It's so
the stoners.
The stoners getting killed. I think first Chuck gets electrocuted,
yes,
right?
Like he takes a dump. The movie's fascinated with dumps.
There's a lot of dumping.
And then he goes down to, well, she's popping popcorn. And like, well, I think he is. And so they do like a popcorn 3D effect. He decides to go down because the electricity is going haywire. And he goes down, and it's kind of a suspenseful scene because once he gets the electricity on, he turns around, there's Jason. Jason pushes him into the electric box, and he gets electrocuted.
Yes, so the lights go out, and that's when Chili, she sees, and I do see why they did this.
I actually think it's cool because it's like the boy who cried wolf.
Exactly.
Suddenly gets.
Well, he runs into the doorway to Chili, and he has a slit throat, but Chili thinks it's another joke. And as audience members, you actually don't know for sure until he dies. Yeah, until he dies. And I guess that's why they couldn't do a death scene, because then we would know he was dead.
The sound it makes when Shelley flops to the ground is like bonk.
And then Chili, when she starts freaking out, I'm sorry, this is the cheesiest. She's supposed to be running, and she runs up the stairs and then back down, and she's running like I walk, like the speed I walk our dog.
She's doing a turkey trot, and she's saying, "Oh my god, oh my god!"
And then she gets a poker in her, and it is hilarious because again, she's running like a trot. Did you notice that too, Jacob, or am I looking too much into her speed?
No, I did notice. I think she was stoned. She could,
oh my god!
She was like emotionally, she's processing it, but her body is very behind. So she's.
It's like at this point we're like, you can get rid of these characters. We don't care. Get back to Chris.
But she does wear a cute little necklace of like a roller skate.
Oh my god!
I don't know.
Yeah. So Chris comes back with Rick, and she's
all
checking.
Bodies are gone, which I think is Jason really cleans up.
Jason loves to clean up. Same thing happened with Ginny and Paul. Same thing. Well, Adrian King had to find them, but he loves to clean house. So
Betsy Palmer did.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Oh, what are you, Ghostface?
I'm just letting you know.
Yeah. So she comes back, and I think like the first thing is when she finds the first body, Rick has already been taken, because there's a part where she goes outside calling for Rick. Rick, where are you? Rick, where are you? And Jason is holding him by the head outside. And poor Rick gets his head squashed and his eyeball pops out.
It's such a crowd pleaser. I've seen it in sold out audiences, and I love it because it gets such a good reaction.
I will say this, the reason why that part shocked me a little bit is because I was used to coming off of part 2 where Paul made it to the end and then disappeared. I was thinking Rick as the love interest of the final girl would make it at least further, but they killed him earlier than I thought. And then in part 4 they kill what's his name so early.
Okay, so once he's dead, then she goes outside and finds the other bike rider,
the motorcycle guy. Yeah, she basically she like first finds the motorcycle guy hanging dead from the tree. Then after she's been looking for Rick gets thrown through the window,
and
at
that's
her.
when it's like on.
Yes, and this is when she's going crazy. But I will say she does stand up to Jason pretty well. Like there are parts like she gets a knife and she's able to get him in the hand and then in the thigh.
Yeah, she runs up the stairs first, throws books on him. Then she goes into the closet and then has to pull the knife out of what's that girl's name?
Debbie. Yeah, she finds poor Debbie.
As a kid, I thought that scene was so effective because it's like, would I have the guts to grab a knife out of my friend's back?
And you mentioned, Jacob, that you actually hear Jason grunt in this a bunch. Like when he gets stabbed, you hear him grunt. And I don't know, do you hear Jason react like that in other movies?
Right when she hits his leg, he goes like, "Arr!" door.
Yeah, I don't remember if we hear him do that in any of the other movies. Maybe he does. I'm not quite sure. But because he also runs in this movie.
He wasn't Jason
He
yet.
wasn't fully formed yet, but they did move him. And I can say this later, but they did move the character of Jason forward in this one, for better or worse. But yeah, he did make a noise, and I think like this point in the movie, it's basically the final chase. Like it's the big chase sequence and everything. I'm in it at this point. I'm into it. Like this was executed pretty well overall. I like it from here on out.
And this is one of those parts where Tim told me while we were watching, he's like, I really like when she does this. And I had never thought about it, but watching it this time, I was like, you know what? I respect this move. When she hides outside holding a log, waits for him to exit, and then hits him over the head with it.
Yeah, she probably thought like if I hit him over the head, I can get in the van and be done with it. But little does she know this huge man is not going to go down easily.
And also, she does get into the van, which is smart because you always want the character in horror movies, just get in the fucking car and drive away.
And she has a Laurie Strode moment. Keys, like from Halloween.
And she also says gas.
I've got gas.
Yeah, well,
she does say that.
I totally forgot that. It actually is set up pretty well as far as story goes. That they do take the gas out. The bikers take the gas out. So it's like, oh, remember, she don't have no gas.
But that is what I like about that, because so many movies, it's almost
There's
like,
no
oh
reason.
God, I have my battery's dead on my cell phone. There's no reason for it. And so many movies, oh, I don't have any gas. And this one, there as an actual reason she doesn't have gas, they siphoned it.
And I kind of remember, like, the weirdest things stick with you, but I remember going to the video store to rent movies when I was really young, and on the VHS tape, I feel like when you turned the back of the VHS box for this movie around, I feel like you could see the part where Jason comes up to the window of the van. That sticks in my mind, right?
Yeah, it is like a very famous picture. I mean, famous in our eyes.
I always find it scary when you're in a car and someone comes up to the window. I know they've done that in so many movies, but
I will say this: I don't think she was strong enough with doing this. I don't
rolling
think
the window up. Yeah,
get his arms to be going up. You know what I mean? I know.
He also probably could have broken through it as it was being rolled up.
He probably could have killed her in 2 seconds.
Yeah, so she can't get away because there's no gas in the van, and she finally gets out of the car and she runs to the barn where the climax is of the movie. I know, you love that word, climax. Well, but barns, it's a good big open space, and she's like first crawling across the rafters, and she does do kind of a power move because she positions herself so she can fall on top of him and knock him over.
And they do show, because it's 3D, they do show her butt go right into the frame, which is supposed to be like Jason's face.
Her butt into the face. Yeah. Well, and then she gets like a shovel. She knocks him with a shovel, and then she ties him to, what is that thing? It was like
to pull the hay up.
It's some sort of thing where she's able to tie his neck around it and then pull it, and it essentially hangs him like any human being would be hung.
Right. So they do build the suspense. She crawls down. She opens the 2 huge doors.
And but the thing is, he's not dead. And that's when we get my other favorite line of the movie, when she says, he can't be alive. No, you can't be alive, right?
She first goes, it's you.
Oh, because what happens is that first off, he's not dead.
He lifts up his mask.
He lifts up his mask and shows her, hey, I'm the crazy guy who attacked you years ago.
And it's like, he's excited.
And he is so creepy. I do like the makeup and the creepiness of his face in this one. Matt's having a coughing fit behind me. But yeah, like when he pulls up the mask and he looks so like a goblin or something.
Yeah, and I think Oscar winner Stan Winston, I think did the first, I don't want to say try, but I don't think they liked what Jason looked like. So like a huge Oscar winner worked on Jason's face.
He is creepy looking in this. And I will say, it's funny that I guess I thought that she knew it was the guy who attacked her the whole time, but she doesn't until he finally shows her his face. And so after she says, you can't be alive, and he's coming after her, out of nowhere, they decide that they're going to bring back the motorcycle guy who was beaten. Apparently, he's not dead. And he comes in, you think, to be the hero.
I mean, they try that aspect, but he gets his hand cut off.
He gets his poor guy comes in, basically, I don't want to say sacrifices himself, because I guess he would have been dead anyway, unless he had just left the whole premises. but he gets his fingers cut off by Jason.
No, I think it's the whole hand.
Oh, the whole hand?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah. So he gets his hand cut off, and basically, but he gives Dana Kimmel enough time where she can like get away because he would have killed her right then.
She grabs an ass. She grabs an ass.
She grabs ass.
She grabs ass. I meant axe. And then the music changes. I love this music change and the cue here because as she's picking up the axe, you can tell she's reluctant and scared, and I think she plays that really well. And I'm getting so emotional because it's such a good scene.
Oh God.
But then you tell him, Jacob, what happened?
She axes him and Jacob.
No,
yeah,
I can't. I'm not.
She puts it in his hand.
She axes him in the face, but before he just topples over, he like thrusts his hands out at her.
It's such a 3D moment, and I mean it's kind of cheesy, but I love it. Like he's like this. I know people can't see me, but it's like he's putting out his hands, like I'm coming for you, and then he just drops.
Well, but really quick, back the biker guy who shows up at the last minute to sacrifice himself or save her or whatever. It just did not land with me because by this point, it's too quick. I've forgotten all about him, not in the good way, and when he shows up. It all happens in like 10 seconds. Like he's alive and he's going to attack and his hand gets cut off and he's dead.
And why him? Have Shelley be that person, like someone else who has that last attack on him.
Like out of all the guys, that big guy, the biker, is probably Jason's size too. So it's kind of like, oh, he's going to save the day.
But why him? He has no relation to Chris.
But it's just kind of one of those things like, hey, if anyone could take on Jason, it could be this guy.
But it doesn't have the emotional impact that it would have had. Like that would have been brilliant, actually. Like for
Shelley to save the day,
for Shelley's arc to finally end on a final sacrifice. That the most
so true.
Like it would have been beautiful in a way.
Yeah, it's a really weird choice that they're like. It's like who's available today? Hey, motorcycle gang guy number 3, you're in.
Yeah, no, actually, I've never thought about that, but now when I'm thinking about it, that's really a good thing because it's like he's effed up twice. Shelley did. If he came in and saved the day,
see, come to me for the ideas, Tim, on your series.
You know what? If
Friday
you could just write that 1982 script over,
I'm going to do it. Let's go back in time. I'm going to repitch it.
Oh my God! How old were you in 82?
I would be 3. Well, 3 in November, so 2 or 3.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a movie of missed opportunities.
So, so she's finally taken care of Jason, but as you know, in a Friday the 13th movie, there always has to be some sort of end scene with a scare. And so she goes into a canoe. She wakes up the next morning, and I find this ending hilarious because first, when she wakes up, she knocks into so many things and screams at everything.
It's like a branch, and then she slowly pushes herself away.
Hits a log, screams. Hits another log, screams. Birds fly through the air, screams. Like literally, like everything happens, she screams.
Yeah, I mean, it's a genuine response.
Do you remember at the end of Scary Movie where they're doing a parody of the scene with Rose McGowan in the garage at the end, but in Scary Movie they've got this sort of like heavier set girl and she's got like blonde or like dark hair.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, Horsey, you scared me, and like Kitty, you scared me. And it kind of I don't know why it made me think of that, but it's like,
doesn't she say like, I'm just a day player?
Like literally it was that scene. But then she does see, then they do get to something that is scary because she looks up and she sees looking at her through a small window in the cabin is Jason, not sure how he got up
on
there.
His face.
And he like smiles in this really creepy way. And I will say, as a kid, that part always scared me because then he starts like running and he's gonna run toward her. And as a kid, that fucking terrified me.
Like it's cool because he's inside the house. Like he went from the barn, obviously to look for her in the house. He breaks the door down. He's running, and then
he
like
disappears.
But one thing that bothers me is why didn't she just get in the water? She's like, this branch.
Yeah.
Like, get out,
God.
Get in the water.
The
get
birds,
out.
the logs, it's the
trees.
It's
everything.
No, the craft. Anyway, but then he just disappears. And then, of course, she's looking around, and then in an attempt to redo that moment from part 1 in the canoe, they have, but it's not Jason, they have a like weird zombie version of Mrs. Voorhees jump out of the lake and grab her off the canoe.
Presumably Mrs. Voorhees. I mean, we don't That's never explained. It's never confirmed.
She's wearing her sweater.
But she was?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I just don't notice the sweater because I'm looking at the face and her head's been cut off. But like I will say this like zombie version of Mrs. Voorhees just is not anywhere close to as good as
it just
like
doesn't work from the
head.
get-go because her head was cut off.
That's what I was going to say.
What if it was a headless person that came up?
That would be even more hilarious. But it's just so funny because they went from the scene starts in the daytime ridiculous with all the screaming to actually scary with Jason running at her to ridiculous again.
They should have just have left it with Jason running after her and then her just waking up in the
exactly
canoe.
Running after her. Maybe right when he gets to her, she wakes up. But
Even
anyway,
Jason jumping out in the canoe would have been better than
something like that.
Not the mom.
And then they switched to another kind of funny scene, and this has been memed so many times because then we switch to police officers taking Chris, who's the only survivor, out of the cabin because
what was all that about a lady in the lake? Oh, this poor girl's been through hell. Here she is.
Apparently that canoe thing did happen, and then she went back in the cat. Who knows? But as they are helping her out into a cop car, she has a mental breakdown where she's screaming, laughing, and crying like all together, and it's hilarious. I'm sorry.
I love it. I love it.
I love it too, but I actually think that it's really a good moment for Dana Kimmel. Like it is laughable in a way, especially in the context of everything we just saw before in this sort of ridiculous movie. But I do think it's pretty realistic the way that she's acting. She's traumatized, and there is that thing where like you're so scared, you've been through so much that you kind of swing back around to laughing into this hysterical place. It kind of reminds me at the end of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre when Sally Hardesty is laughing in the back of the truck or whatever.
Isn't it so strange that movie came first, and it's so much more effective than this one? So you would think that they would have gotten even more darker and scarier and everything. And this movie's kind of light.
I totally get what you're saying, Jacob, in terms of like if you were literally like had seen all of your friends dead and had to face off with a killer and stuff, you would be totally traumatized. So in that respect, I totally like it. It's something about the way she plays it that it's just in every screening we've gone at, the whole audience laughs at it. And I will say, and I mentioned this to Tim yesterday, is that I remember during COVID seeing a meme that said me finally coming out of my house after lockdown, and it showed this part with Dana Kimmel, and it's so hilarious because like it is really funny because she's laughing, she's crying, she's everything. But
they also do like a cool like pan over to Jason and just they picked up every other body, but they left Jason there.
Well, the final shot is of Jason with the axe still in his head at the barn, and then they show the lake. So what I'm wondering is, was her imagining Jason still being alive and running at her? That was all in her head.
Right. That was a clear daydream.
But the lady in the water was...
That's all her.
So it's all
her losing her mind.
One thing we can say, and we said this in the Larry Zerner interview, this is in Crystal Lake Memories, apparently they had a version of this ending scene where she was going to imagine, I think it was...
She walks up to the house and Jason chops off her head.
Was Jason or Mrs. Voorhees?
It's Jason.
Jason chops off her head, and they actually shot this, I guess, right?
Yeah, and there's pictures of it, of the making of, but they didn't like that ending.
Now,
apparently.
which would you have preferred, Jacob? The one we got with her grabbing him out of the canoe, or seeing her get decapitated and then waking up?
Well, I probably the decapitation for sure. I liked what you said earlier about Jason being seen through the window and then he's like running and it's scary, but then it kind of gets ruined by Mrs. Voorhees jumping out of the lake. So yeah, I think I'd rather see it go the other way.
To me, it's almost like they had a bingo card of like things to do in a final scene. One of them, Jason appearing and running at you. One of them, someone jumping out of the lake. One of them.
I like that the 1, 2, and 3 do not stray from like a girl walking over and getting in a canoe.
The formula, yeah.
Yeah, like they definitely keep to the formula, but they also were trying something new. They're like, okay, how about Mrs. Voorhees, who got her head chopped off?
But she's in the lake. She was never in the lake.
And she can do things. I'm like,
yeah,
okay.
I just don't think that it was refined enough and it wasn't earned enough. And so this movie is so many, it's just, like I said, it's very lots of missed opportunities and lots of hit or miss moments.
Well, they probably were thinking like, oh, what would people never expect? Oh, how about that character that got their head chopped off is suddenly now mobile?
Oh, yeah, because they're like, well, we've had Jason jump out of the canoe. You know what they'll never expect? Mrs. Voorhees. Now, she was never in the lake.
And this movie was pretty cheap to make. Apparently, it was under $3 million, maybe $2 million. And it was the highest grossing Friday the 13th film up until Freddy vs. Jason.
That's so interesting. I mean, I think that this movie, like looking at it recently as we did, my general thought is just that it doesn't move the franchise or the story of Jason or anything like that forward at all. It really doesn't. It only seems to move the character of Jason forward as like a big villain, because they get a bigger actor, so he's like he looks bigger and scarier. They get the Jason mask thing, but other than that, it doesn't really do anything other. It's just sort of filler in the franchise. I still like it. I still think it's enjoyable in certain ways, but also like they spend so much of the movie wasting time on characters that we do not care about. The barn is not a compelling location, and they spend a ton of time there, which, by the way, haven't you like seen the barn in real life, Tim?
I've passed it. I drove past it because it's out there. It's my boss filmed a movie where there was a camp setting, and we were very close to where they filmed it.
But did you see a lady in the lake?
Hey, that poor young girl's been through hell. Oh, here she comes. Oh.
Yeah. But yeah, so like it doesn't, to me, what did you think? How do you feel about this movie and its place in the franchise?
I personally love this film. I mean, yes, I totally agree with everything you said. It doesn't, I think they probably, because it was 3D, had to be in a very, very condensed location. Like, okay, we can do it in a barn in this cabin that we built, which sadly, there were these kids apparently set it on fire in 2006. So it's gone. You can't walk around, but apparently the fireplace is still there. But I love this film because it hit at a time when I was 10 years old. I remember renting the video with my mom, took me to the video store to get it. And my two other brothers were at parties, because my brother was a junior high, could party, and my other brother could party, and I could just sit at home and watch Friday the 13th Part 3.
Wow, that's hilarious.
I'm not bitter.
My thoughts on this one, again, it's not a secret that it's not one of my favorites in the series. I do agree that it doesn't really push the series forward, but I'd call it fun filler. And what I mean is that it's still fun to watch, but it doesn't do anything differently. And, when you erase the 3D factor, it really is just Steve Miner doing a second Friday the 13th, same director, a new group of kids, same sort of thing, nothing much different other than Jason gets a mask. The problem is it's weaker than the previous entry. So if you're going to do two entries,
I think it's stronger in the last 20 minutes. Like, I think Adrian King and Amy Steele's chase scenes are not as good as Dana's. Dana's is the best one.
I'll give you certain moves Dana makes, and the car part on the bridge is good, but the final part of Dana, like just with hanging him and then the axe in the forehead, I don't think competes with Ginny pretending to be Mrs. Voorhees.
Well, I agree to disagree.
Well, I mean, that's like, this is like an actual argument or discussion that we could all have. But for me, the part one has the best chase of all, just because of the reveal of Mrs. Voorhees. And then she's verbal. She's saying so many things through the whole chase sequence with Adrian King. And part two, I guess, like, I always liked part two, the sequence at the end, and I liked when Jenny was in Jason's house and you can see him kind of like running in the forest and coming up through the window. Like, there are things I like about it, but I do think that in terms of the threat, like Jason and the threat of danger it's at its height in part three compared to the two others. So it is like scarier.
And but I will say, Tim, because I can find things in part three, like I said, that will be part two, and Vera's death and Debbie's death, I think, are probably better death scenes than the death scenes in part two. I mean, the shish kebab in part two, it's so good, but because they cut so much of it, it's not as effective. And then I can't really think of any memorable death scenes in part two. And then part one, Kevin Bacon's, and then the girl that got the axe through the forehead. But again, there's hits and there's misses in part three. I think for me, the toughest thing is I just don't identify as much with the final girl in part three as I did with part one and two.
I think I identify with her because she's gorgeous. I'm gorgeous.
Yeah, gorgeous.
She is gorgeous. I just kept thinking, wow, Dana Kimmel is so cute in this movie. She's such a beautiful young girl in the movie, and her take on the role, like, I think you made a good observation, Tim, about kind of she comes from a sitcom background. I don't think she's bad in the movie at all, personally. I just think her tone is a little out of tone with the more naturalistic performances in it, but I still think she carries the movie well enough. I thought her monologue was good. I think the ending of it's good. I think the whole ending chase sequence is good. So like, and you know, also she's not served well by the dialogue in the earlier parts of the film when they're just like showing up in the van and everything.
Even the pictures are still crooked.
I was just thinking of some of the lines that are kind of cringe, like sex, sex, sex. That's all you guys ever talk about.
What would a weekend in the country be without sex? She goes, cool it, Auntie.
Well, so overall, like, again, this is always, I've never not wanted to watch this movie. Like, I always am like, if we're like, oh, let's put on part 3, sure, that'll be fun. But it's never going to be one of my go-to, like, if I wanted to show like my nephew
show him the last 20 minutes,
one of the really good Friday the 13th, I'm going to pick definitely 1 or 2 or 4 or 7. Like, I just really like those, and there's like an element to them that I think is unique.
Well, part 4 is much tougher to watch with, like, because part 4 is much more sex focused. Part 3 is a little more tamer.
Oh yeah, but I'm just talking more about the dynamic of the
but as a
characters.
kid, I felt more comfortable watching part 3 with my family because as you know, it's always about sex, and like Friday 13th definitely are sex focused.
Yeah, part 3 is like the more, in some ways, it's like the more conservative one.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of a little more buttoned up. At least like with the final girl, you really get a sense of like almost like a sense of purity, which is interesting.
Well, she famously has, I guess, rattled off a quote to Fangora, which she does not remember saying, but she asked, like, hey, could I change some lines to be less sexual? And like everyone crucified her, like, don't you dare.
Yeah, so she's like a little bit more of the final girl. She's probably the most prudish, I guess.
That's why I relate.
I'm just going to say that's why Tim relates to her anyway.
She's got that beautiful blue sweater. She's got it going on.
Well, it was really fun. It was really enjoyable to watch the movie again with you guys and to be on the podcast as an actual voice. So, you know, thank you for.
And I just want to say like a big thank you to Jacob. I know you didn't want any big like intro or whatever, but again, like for people who listen to Happy Horror Time and you think, oh, it's Matt and Tim, this truly is a 3-person operation. Jacob is just as integral to Happy Horror Time as the two of us. And so if you enjoy the show, he's just as much to thank as us. We're just the annoying voices you hear every week.
I need to know, I don't know if I've ever asked Jacob this, who do you find more annoying when listening to it?
I think he knows who he has to answer that or where he'll be sleeping tonight. Jacob?
I never think about it in terms of who I find more annoying. I mean, yeah, I just never think that way.
Oh, that's
nice try.
Sweet.
What he meant to say was Tim Murdoch.
Well, that's fine.
Just kidding. No. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for joining us for this very special Friday the 13th episode.
Happy Friday 13th, you guys.
Yes, happy Friday the 13th. And I think we're going to start doing this every Friday the 13th as we go through. I mean, we have enough movies to do. Like, it's fun. I mean, what else do you want to think about and talk about and listen to other than discussions about Friday the 13th?
Could you imagine anyone listening to this and not seeing a Friday the 13th? They would be so lost with our random quotes. They'd be like,
God.
what are you talking about?
Don't we have a patron who doesn't watch horror movies but just listens to you guys?
My entire family.
Oh, God. Well, I mean, like, hey, that means that they love. Well, but I mean, for listeners, again, thank you so much for tuning in on this random Friday. Sorry, it's not a random Friday. It's Friday the 13th, but we usually don't have releases on
and happy
Friday.
holidays. It's December.
Yes, happy holidays in advance, and we will be talking to you again soon.
Higgins Haven.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of Happy Horror Time.
If you'd like to support the podcast, please sign up to be a patron at www.patreon.com/happyhorrortime. As a patron, you get access to all our bonus content, which now includes 2 new bonus episodes every month, a monthly after-show mini episode, access to our Discord community so you can chat with us directly, and the chance to review a film with us in one of our bonus episodes.
Patrons also get all our regular episodes ad-free and a day early, our monthly newsletter, the chance to vote in polls, and autographed Happy Horror Time stickers.
I'm Matt Emmert.
And I'm Tim Murdoch.
And we hope you have a happy horror time.